Okay, hey, this is Aaron Brown with Nintendo World Report. I'm here with David and Ian from Yacht Club Games. We're going to talk about some Shovel Knight. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Great. Yeah, we're just doing lots of patches for the game and doing updates and trying to get it out internationally and lots of that kind of.
I thought that when Shovel Knight was done that we would be able to relax and maybe gather our thoughts a little bit, but instead things are busier than ever. So yeah, we're doing all that stuff, just making sure that we can keep the energy going in terms of getting it out to everyone and making sure that it's perfect.
Right, yeah, I was going to ask about that, but it seems like you guys jumped the gun. You guys seem still amped, still riding the wave, which is awesome. So as far as development-wise, for the levels, you want to explain the brainstorming process that went behind it, because they feel so lovingly crafted.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, some of our Kickstarter backers actually got to sit in on this process since we had a certain reward tier where you could join in on our design hangouts, and we had a big whiteboard, and we just went through the whole process, as I'll detail right now. We usually start with the theme of the stage is the strongest driving thing, and that's usually already derived from the theme of the character. So it's okay, Treasure Knight is a greedy person who has a submarine and is probably underwater based. So we're looking at an underwater stage that maybe that means mobility that slows the player down. Maybe that means sometimes you're just on the seabed, but other times you're in a mechanical submarine or something like that to help balance the fact that he's a diver and also a treasure hunter. And from there, we usually sit around, the group gets together in front of a whiteboard or just with a notepad of paper, and we just start listing out ideas. So it's what if there's seaweed that obscures the playfield, so you have to cut it? What if there's, a scary angler fish that mimics something Shovel Knight looks for? What if there's anchors that fall or missiles that shoot? And we kind of just go through and just spitball many, many, many ideas. And then we cut it down to the nice NES number of 7 major ideas or 4 major ideas and try to expand on it. Usually we're looking for something like a mechanic that can be used in a few different ways. So in the example of the seaweed, covering the playfield, that works for a single screen, but there's only so much we can do to expand upon it, screen after screen after screen. So we usually try to stick with something that can get a lot of reuse or a lot of combinations and things like that.
Yeah, and it's finding the right, the things that can go together, well, right? It's well, maybe the seaweed is a cool idea on its own, but the seaweed doesn't work with an enemy. So we can't get 2 ideas out of a combination. So it's figuring out the right things that work together well too.
Yeah, and then we hone it into we do know we've made levels before, so we know some big things that we're looking for. A good example is it's an anglerfish, that'd be great. How about he's the mid boss? That's the big enemy you fight, the griffin or something like that. Instead of making him just a random enemy, he could be a big event. Or we know we want 2 or 3 mobility things that platforms that move in surprising ways or ways that test the player's mobility. So we ended up with the falling anchors and the torpedoes and things like that. So it's kind of we spitball a lot of ideas and then we try to hone them into the slots, so to speak, for what we expect out of a level, which is platforming challenges, combat challenges, and things slight tweaks to mobility.
Right on. So I guess, what about the characters? Same question for the characters, since they're so full of personality, and then you got the Tribal King. How'd you come up with those guys?
Well,
it's sort of all over the place. In terms of the bosses, they were usually derived based on the stage theme. So we said, we want a lava theme, we want a regal, castle theme. And then it was spitballing, name ideas for, what would fit in that theme.
Gotcha.
Right. For the longest time, Plague Knight was actually called Dyna Knight, both for that lovely dynamite style name play on words, and also because we wanted a character that was explosives and explosions. But instead he ended up more as a plague doctor and alchemy, but the core gameplay, which was explosions, still managed to survive through.
Yes.
However, as far as like villagers, like NPCs, like Travel King, all of those have they have their own unique origin story, whether it's a joke that went on far too long inside the Yacht Club Games chat room, or like a funny idea somebody scrawled on a napkin at a convention. They all kind of collaborated together in weird and odd ways.
Nice, I like it. So, in the end, which character do you think changed the most from start to finish?
Well, Shield Knight is a good example of like a radical change, I would say. But it was like pretty sudden, so it's like a weird start to finish might not be the best descriptor for that. But Shield Knight originally started off as like your typical MacGuffin princess. She was like basically we didn't have a plan for her. It was like we knew we wanted to have that same like the damsel in distress format that everyone is so loving so much these days. But like that was like a key part of like what made those 80s games, right? Mm-hmm. So we wanted to like do that, and then once we had laid that down as an idea that we wanted to do, we said, hey, like that like princess way of doing it is like sort of out of date, right? Like how can we modernize it a little bit to like the same way we did with everything in the game? It's like how can we make it like more appealing to today's gamers and like in that way? So
still maintain the heritage,
right? While still maintaining like. Actually, like we think damsel in distress is a good idea. Like it does work. Obviously, it worked because like we love those games, right? But like, how do we find a way to like make it appealing and make it so it's like not sexist and not dumb, and like show the merits of that idea? Like that's like almost the theme of Shovel Knight is like showing what the merits are of these like 80s ideas and like why we shouldn't abandon some of them.
Yeah, so in the case specifically, it started off as a princess, and we never, like, at one point, we never had a design for the princess that we were happy with. We had, like, maybe something pixel scrawled out, maybe, like, a couple, like, sketches designed, but at no point did it ever feel like that was actually a character. We're like, oh yeah, like, we should probably, like, figure that part out. And then a little bit into development, we realized, like, we have all these knights, like, why isn't the person in this, like, why isn't the person in this role also a knight? And then we started, like, well, what kind of knight would she be? Like, would she be, like, a cool archer knight, or, like, a wizard, or, like, something like that? And, we ended up with Shield Knight just, being a fun idea that we started, like, embellishing more and more. And it wasn't until, well, I don't want to spoil the end of the game, but as that character grew into that role, we were able to find, more and more areas where that character made sense and where they could actually shine. So we were able to bring them a lot more closer to the forefront. And hopefully we can continue to do that in like future works. We can like explore these characters that maybe were more of a side role in this project.
Yeah, it's definitely working out so far. So, was there anything that you guys had to cut from the game that you would like to have included, or maybe be patched in at a later time?
I mean, the funny thing about this one is, I mean, I've worked on a lot of games where things were cut, and usually the guillotine comes down due to time or like financial constraints. But for us, I don't think we encountered that too much on this project. When we had an idea, we stuck with it and like let it simmer and like in terms of the team thinking about it until we all thought it was a great idea and went all in on it. So there wasn't any stage that was thrown out. There weren't any concepts that we just decided. I mean, there were lists of things on a bulletin board or like on a marker board that we didn't follow up on, just like all those level ideas we were talking about. But we never had a character working in the game or like a system that we decided to act on this one. We kind of,
it was like nothing major. It was like, like a joke or two that we missed.
Right.
Or, I guess we shouldn't have like 15 levels because like we're gonna kill ourselves by doing 15. Let's do 14 levels instead.
Like let's take out the casino night zone. Wasn't something that happened. And I think that's because we built this game from the ground up. We took the core mechanics and we kept adding to it when we thought it was a really good idea. as opposed to committing to a lot of like really big ideas and trying to like hone them into a game. So I think that's one of the natural reasons we came across that. But now that we're approaching updates and new content, like we're definitely like the gears are turning again. So we have a lot of new ideas, and it would be great to expand on all of them.
Right, totally. So, as everyone should already know about Shovel Knight, its inspirations, have people have pointed out, like Zelda 2, Mega Man, DuckTales, and so forth. Were there any less obvious titles that contributed to the design that people might not know about?
This one's always, that's tricky because I don't think there were a lot of games that we were secretly trying to slot in there. It wasn't like, let's make a boss that's like a callback to Snake Rattle and Roll. This will be great.
Right.
We never made like explicit choices like that. I think instead, what happened was we all played these games before, and we've all played different ones. Like I've played Codename Viper and Digger T Rock and a lot of like weird NES games that maybe wasn't in your library or was in your library. And we all, rather than like coming up with a list of references, we all just had a distilled idea of what we remember generally playing on the NES, which is like, like characters, like if a character needed to appear in, they would probably look like this, or if a sound effect for like a charging enemy would probably sound something like this. So rather than calling back to specific things, it was more like a general, like subconscious for what we thought about NES at the time. But D'Angelo, maybe you have something super cool that you put in.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, there weren't any times where we were going, like, saying, like, what should we add from this game, right?
Right.
Like, even when, I mean, really the only time that I think that happened was the very birth of the idea, like saying, like, Zelda 2's down thrust is cool. How can we make a whole game out of that?
Yes.
Like, that was really the only instance of it. But we did have things that were like, hey, we want to make a level map, a world map, because, like, world maps are, like, really common in NES games and really cool. How can we make it even cooler, right? Or make it, like, really fun, like NES games. And then we might look at, like, 50 NES world map games and go, like, hey, Super Mario 3 had, like, a really awesome world map. Like, what was special about that world map? And, like, how can we find, like, ways to make it, like, Shovel Knight-like?
Right. The funny thing about it, though, is even with that in mind, without trying to like recall specific games too hard, we accidentally stumbled across that for a lot of people. And maybe that's because the NES had a common design language or a common set of expectations. My favorite is we were at Indiecade showing off the King Knight stage. And King Knight has an attack where bugles come out of the side and they shoot confetti that falls down in like a light floaty pattern that could possibly hit the player. And one person who was attending Indiecade said, "Oh my God, you guys played Crystalis, right?" And I'm like, wait. It's like, yeah, I played that on Game Boy Color, but it's like, you'd have to talk with like D'Angelo. And they went over to David and they're like, "You played Crystalis. I know it because that confetti pattern is totally the same pattern that one of the bosses used with a leaf attack."
And I was like, yeah, I totally played that game and it was amazing, but I had no idea. Like, and that's like typical. Like, I mean, there's just so many elements. Like when you're building out of these like simple constructs, right? I think you're naturally going to bump into these other games that were built out of similar constructs. Like, it's so simple, you can only do so many things to an extent. And it's like you end up reminding people of the things they love.
Right, yeah, it seems like you guys just took like grandma's old stew recipe and just mixed it up, and it's just like,
right.
Just like you always remembered.
And it's like, I mean, we're building an NES medieval game, right? And that's gonna remind you of Zelda, and it's gonna remind you of Faxanadu. And it's like, were we pulling from those? Like, not really, but like, that's what it is.
Yeah, awesome. So, I guess going back to, you said the core idea, the Zelda 2 down thrust. What was the original elevator pitch that you guys envisioned, as it being your first project?
I mean, the original pitch when we were embellishing it as a team was, what if there was a game where you were a knight who could flip enemies into the air so that you flip them upside down and then you can finish them off with a down thrust attack. So there's like a 1-2 mechanic of flipping and defeating them with an aerial attack. That was pretty much what we went on for a lot, for like the base of it. So it's like, it would be platformer focused. It wouldn't be, it would have, since the game would have a combat emphasis to it, we didn't want to have weird Mario, we didn't want Mario style momentum. We wanted to be like a controllable character because jumping and hitting characters is difficult enough. And from there, we started making levels, we started making bosses, and started honing in what we were looking for.
Right. Yeah, and I think like the want to do that was like based on we all came from Way Forward, and we were making remakes and new games and series like Contra 4 and Double Dragon Neon, like games that were based on these NES classics, right? And modernizing them, but in a different sense. Like we were modernizing them with new graphics and with new gameplay and that kind of thing. And I think we were all sort of like wanting to really go back and make, like, what if we made one of those games instead of what if we recreated a new modern entry in the franchise? What if we instead like made the original franchise?
Yeah. Right. You guys basically did that, clearly. And, the reaction to the game has been overwhelmingly positive. So when did you guys realize that you had something special on your hands?
The first time for me, it's probably different for everyone at Yacht Club, but the first time for me is just like when we showed the game at PAX during our Kickstarter, and it was just like overwhelming how much it like blew people's minds, which is weird to think about. Like when we went to PAX with an NES game, it's like, oh, no one's gonna pay attention to this when you have like the biggest AAA like crazy graphics thing next to your booth, right? It's like who's gonna care? But like people were so in love with it, and it just surprised me so much.
Yeah, I would say PAX was definitely the turning point. We received great support during the first week of our Kickstarter for sure. Like a lot of people rallying, a lot of people really saying like, oh, this looks great. But being able to meet people in person, both people that have been following the project and they're like, yeah, like I'm on board since day one. And the guy who's like, hey, I just walked by and I think Hovel Knight is a cool game. And it's like, oh, it's called Shovel Knight. He's like, yeah, okay, great. Anyway, I can't wait to play it.
Yeah, having people in the flesh just makes it feel that much more real, right?
Yeah. So that was but that was like the first step. That was like, oh, like, some people like this. Maybe the Kickstarter will go okay and we can make this game and like some people will think it's pretty neat. But I guess rather than being surprised at any one major point, I've been continuously surprised just at the level of support, the level of like love that I've seen just for Shovel Knight in general. Just seeing like fan art, Never's posts, or the occasional email, like every day I'm continuously surprised.
Right, that's gotta feel amazing. So giving the resounding success, like, are you guys planning on doing a Shovel Knight 2, Dig Deeper? Or like what you guys said you guys were doing a lot following up post-release, getting it and other territories and stuff. You just want to elaborate on your plans?
We have a lot of Shovel Knight 1 left to do still. But some of those are kind of like, they would be like, we're going to release additional playable characters, like playable King Knight, Spectre Knight, Plague Knight. And so those are going to kind of be similar to like Sonic and Knuckles style, where you could run through the campaign as a different character with slightly tweaked mobility. We have 4-player battle mode coming up, and we have gender swap mode, which will allow us to like have a bit more fun with the script and characters and sort of like put them under a different lens. And that's going to probably keep us busy for a good while. I would love to do another Shovel Knight, like to approach it again and kind of like hone in where we're going. But maybe we could make the jump to 16-bit and make like Super Shovel Knight, where it's like a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, but also like kind of nice and like from a combat perspective. We could make the long jump to Shovel Knight 64 and make it all mobility based. I guess we have a lot of ideas like that, but nothing will approach it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be making Shovel Knight 1 for the next year, so I mean, this discussion is going to be happening
right
after we finish that.
I imagine by then we'll be sick of Shovel Knight, though.
Yeah, I would imagine we'll be making some like crazy I don't know, simulation game instead.
A garden simulator.
Right.
With a real shovel.
To buck expectations, though, I would say Shovel Knight 2, he should get the cloud shovel, which allows him to dig into the sky.
Oh my gosh.
Just to turn everything on its head. Nice.
So, just got a couple more. What the heck's up with butt mode? How did that come about?
Butt mode was so we had all these stretch goals, right? And we kept hitting them, and we were running out of ideas for what to add in the game, and we were thinking we can't add anymore. We're gonna be making Shovel Knight for the next decade if we keep adding stretch goals, right?
Battle mode.
Battle mode is a huge feature which will take forever to make. We can't make something better than that.
So this was all on the last 2 days of our campaign. It's okay, battle mode was reached. Update the image and put a big celebration thing, but we're done. We can't add any more content. But we were also just about to hit the record button on a 24-hour live stream for a celebration where we were all at Sean's place. We were all ready to be up for the next 24 hours to dance in front of the camera and answer everyone's questions as much as possible. And one of the questions that kept coming up was, hey, what's the stretch goal after battle mode? Why should I pledge more? Is something cool happening? And during a moment of delirium, Sean just said, the next stretch goal is butt mode. And someone's like, what? Could you tell me about butt mode? He's like, it's butt mode. You guys don't know what butt mode is, and you won't know if we don't reach it. And so, throughout the night, this got a little worse because people kept asking, I can't wait. I'm excited for butt mode. And someone's like, I bet butt mode's going to be the best ever. And so we just, silently, at one point, Sean said, well, if we reach, 310,000, then butt mode will be unlocked. And so we eventually reached that, and everyone's like, wow, everyone thanks. I can't believe we did it. Butt mode has been achieved. And we signed off for the night without anyone really knowing what that actually meant.
Yeah, and over the course of the year, we kept getting, tweets or whatever, when is butt mode coming? What is butt mode? I want to know what butt mode is, right? We're I have no clue what butt mode is.
So then one day, I think the idea was, joked about, oh, maybe, we can do something funny with the text. But one time, a few months ago, we came into work one day, and there was a message in the chat channel from David that said, "Hey guys, update the game. Butt mode is in." And we're like, "What?" And so we just booted it up and kind of walked around, and we saw modern day butt mode, and we all loved it so much that we decided to keep it.
And that is a good story. So I guess, I don't know why anyone wouldn't have played this yet, but in 2 words, what makes Shovel Knight so great to you?
In 2 words?
In 2 words. You have 2 words.
Good fun.
I would say fun love.
Good fun love.
Butt mode is fun love.
Yes.
To expand on what David said, we wanted a game that could be immediately picked up and played, that you could understand it if you saw it. And I think we put a lot of love and attention into a lot of surprising areas throughout the game.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with that. It works super well, and, as I said before, and as you guys obviously know, it's been a success. Everyone loves it, so I just thank you guys for taking the time out, answering these questions, and I'm definitely looking forward to the more content that's on its way.
Oh, of course. Thank you for reaching out for coverage. The game, no matter what we did here, if people didn't know about it or didn't even think to give it a look, then all of this would have been for nothing. So I really appreciate just staying in contact and letting us do interviews like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
No problem. Thank you.
But yeah, we're I can't believe just the level of support we're getting. I can't believe that everyone likes it. Or that even some people don't like it. I can believe that. But it's been truly great. So we're just hoping that we can keep continue to delight and impress everyone with new content and just everything we can do. Follow it up, essentially.
Sounds like a plan.